Welcome to the deep dive. We're tackling, well, a truly monumental figure today, Winston Churchill.
Absolutely. Born 1874, lived right through to 1965. His life really did span an incredible era of change.
And our guide for this is quite comprehensive, isn't it?
It is. We're using the Vietnamese Wikipedia page on Churchill. It covers, well, everything, birth to death. But for this deep dive, we're focusing on his journey up to 1922.
Okay.
So the mission, really, is to pull out those key early insights, maybe find a few surprises in this very detailed account for you.
Right. Let's get into it. Birth at Blenheim Palace. I mean, that's hardly a humble beginning.
Not exactly, no. We're talking serious aristocratic English roots, descendant of the Duke of Marlborough.
But there's that American connection, too, which always strikes me as interesting.
Yes, his mother, Jenny Jerome, American, and her father was a very successful entrepreneur. So that transatlantic mix is definitely part of the story.
And his father, Lord Randolph Churchill.
A conservative MP, very much part of the political establishment.
Mhm.
Jenny, well, she married into that aristocracy, but brought perhaps a different kind of energy.
And his early childhood wasn't all spent in Oxfordshire, was it? There was time in Ireland.
That's right. Back in 1876, his grandfather, the Duke, got appointed Lord Lieutenant of Ireland. So off the family went to Dublin for a bit. His younger brother Jack was even born there. And, as his parents' own relationship apparently became a bit strained, his nanny, Elizabeth Everest, became really central.
Ah, the nanny connection, often so important.
He called her his closest friend for 20 years. It really does make you think about those early formative relationships.
Absolutely. Okay, so schooling. The source suggests it wasn't exactly plain sailing academically.
No, it's putting it mildly. St. George's School, first, not great, apparently, academically or behaviorally.
Oh, dear.
Brunswick School was a bit better, but he only just scraped through the entrance exam for Harrow. And it seems his father had already decided on a military career for him, so Harrow was geared towards that. Even getting into Sandhurst, the Royal Military College. Well, that took 3 attempts.
3 attempts. Okay, so maybe not academically gifted in the traditional sense, but definitely persistent.
That's a key takeaway, I think. That determination was there early on.
And sadly, his father didn't live to see him properly start that military path.
No, tragically. Lord Randolph died in January 1895, just about a month after Winston finally got into Sandhurst. A huge blow, undoubtedly, for a young man just starting out.
Yeah, must have been. So 1895, he gets his commission, 4th Queen's Own Hussars. But he wasn't one for just, sitting around in barracks.
Definitely not. He was actively looking for action, using his mother's connections, frankly.
Right.
His first real taste came later that year, 1895, when he went to Cuba. Not as a soldier, but as a correspondent for the Daily Graphic, watching the Cuban War of Independence.
Ah, the journalist angle starts early.
It does. First time as a war reporter. And apparently, after a trip to New York around then, he wrote to his mother saying how impressed he was with the Americans.
Interesting. Then off to India with the Hussars in '96. Bangalore, Calcutta. Sounds like he was soaking it all in.
He certainly seems to have been. And India, this 19-month posting, was also crucial for his self-education.
How so?
Well, his mother kept sending him books. Plato, Gibbon, Darwin, Macaulay. Major thinkers. He really threw himself into reading them.
So, creating his own curriculum, essentially.
Pretty much. Their letters show him asking for political stuff, too, like the annual register. It wasn't just random reading. It was focused. And it built this, lifelong habit of tackling complex subjects himself. Gave him real intellectual confidence.
Makes sense. And alongside the soldiering and the studying, his own views were forming. Religion, politics.
Yeah, definitely. Letters from the time show him, well, pretty skeptical about organized religion, Christianity specifically. Called it a pleasant anesthetic at one point.
Strong words.
Though he did see Protestantism as a step nearer to reason than Catholicism. Politically, well, despite being from a Tory family, he was already calling himself a liberal in all but name.
Really? Why?
Mainly because he was dead set against Irish home rule. But his sympathies leaned towards the more democratic, progressive wing of the Conservative Party. He even gave his first political speech for the Primrose League.
So already carving out his own space, even within the party.
Exactly. Not afraid to be nuanced, or perhaps contradictory, depending on how you look at it.
Then he volunteers for the Malcan Field Force, Northwest Frontier, soldier and journalist again.
Yep, that dual role pops up again. It was productive. His experiences directly led to his first book, The Story of the Malcan Field Force. Got good reviews, too.
And he wrote a novel around then as well.
He did. Savonarola, a Ruritanian romance, apparently. Shows his range, I suppose. But writing was more than just a hobby. It seems it was crucial for managing his moods, his black dog, as he called it, especially when he was out of office later on.
The black dog? Yes, that shadow. Okay, next stop, Sudan. With Kitchener, Battle of Omdurman.
Right, 1898 with the 21st Lancers. He was in the thick of it. But again, he wasn't just swept up in the victory. He was actually quite critical of Kitchener afterwards.
Oh.
About what? Particularly the treatment of wounded enemy soldiers and the desecration of Muhammad Ahmad's tomb shows an early sort of independent moral judgment, perhaps.
Interesting. So after Sudan, back home, another book, The River War, and then the big decision, leave the army for politics, 1899.
A huge pivot. He threw himself into it, speaking at conservative meetings, got selected for a by-election in Oldham.
How did that go?
He lost.
Yeah.
Narrowly to the Liberal candidate, defined himself as a conservative and a Democratic Tory in the campaign. But yeah, initial setback.
Didn't stop him for long, though, did it? Boer War kicks off.
And he's off again. South Africa, this time as a correspondent for the Morning Post. And this period, I mean, it reads like pure adventure fiction.
The capture and escape.
Exactly. Near Ladysmith gets captured, becomes a prisoner of war. Then this incredibly dramatic escape from the POW camp in Pretoria, hiding on trains in a mine, eventually making it to Portuguese Mozambique.
Made him famous overnight, I imagine.
Huge press coverage. Really put him on the map.
And he didn't just report, he actually fought again.
Briefly, yeah. Rejoined the army as a lieutenant in the South African Light Horse. Took part in relieving Ladysmith, capturing Pretoria. Was actually one of the first Brits into both places.
Wow.
He even accepted the surrender of some Boer guards with his cousin, the Duke of Marlborough. But importantly, even then, he was publicly calling for generosity and toleration towards the Boers.
Yep.
Quite forward-thinking.
So back to England in 1900, his war dispatches are a bestseller, and then election time.
And this time he wins. Gets that conservative seat in Oldham. He's 25 years old, member of Parliament.
Quite the entrance.
And he kept the momentum going, published Ian Hamilton's March about South Africa, then did a massive speaking tour, Britain, the U.S.
Met Mark Twain, McKinley, Teddy Roosevelt.
Yep. Didn't quite hit it off with Roosevelt, apparently. Also toured Canada, crucial, because MPs weren't paid then, so the lectures brought in needed income. Then Paris, Madrid, Gibraltar in 1901. Really building his profile.
Okay, so he arrives in Parliament, 1901, conservative MP, but that independent streak, it didn't take long to show up, did it?
Not at all. His maiden speech got attention. He linked up with the Hooligans' younger, sort of progressive Tories.
Right, showing that leaning again.
But he pretty quickly started clashing with his own party's government. Big issue was defense spending. He wanted more focus on the Navy.
Ah, the Navy, a recurring theme.
And his views just started aligning more and more with the liberals, especially the sort of liberal imperialist wing, people like Asquith. He even said himself he was drifting steadily to the left.
Did he think about leaving the party then?
He actually considered trying to create a more democratic or progressive wing within the conservatives, or even a new center party to bridge the gap between conservatives and liberals. Shows how fluid things felt to him, perhaps.
Fascinating. But the real sticking point became economics. Protectionism versus free trade.
That was the big one, yes. He was vehemently against the conservatives' move towards protectionist tariffs. Joined the Free Food League, championed free trade.
Which wasn't going to win him points with the party leadership.
Exactly. He knew it would kill any chance of getting into a conservative cabinet. Plus, the liberals were looking increasingly strong. He started voting with the liberal opposition more often, opposing defense hikes, backing trade unions.
So the writing was on the wall.
Pretty much. The government announced protectionist legislation in late 1903. His own constituency association in Oldham told him they wouldn't back him next time.
Ouch.
Then in May 1904, he gave this powerful speech against the government's Aliens Bill, defending Britain's tradition of free entry and asylum, arguing against prejudice.
A defining moment.
Seems like it.
Yeah.
Because just weeks later, May 31st, 1904, he did it. He physically crossed the floor of the House of Commons and sat down with the Liberal Party.
Wow, that's drama. A huge move.
Absolutely massive. Showed he'd follow his convictions, whatever the political cost.
So Liberal MP, 1904 onwards, he must have been quite a catch for them.
Oh, definitely. He quickly became a leading voice for progressive causes, working alongside figures like John Morley and, crucially, David Lloyd George.
Lloyd George, right.
And when the conservative government collapsed in late 1905, the Liberals under Campbell Bannerman swept to power in the January 1906 election. Huge landslide. And Churchill won a new seat. northwest Manchester.
And he published that big biography of his father around then, too.
Yes, Lord Randolph Churchill. Came out that same month, January 1906. Big advance. Very well received. Quite an undertaking while switching parties and fighting an election.
Shows his energy levels.
It does.
Yeah.
And interestingly, someone else published a biography of him around then, too. Alexander McCallum Scott, another Liberal MP, shows he was already seen as a major figure.
So in the new Liberal government, he gets a junior role.
Undersecretary of State for the Colonies. He actually asked for it, apparently, working under the Earl of Elgin. And crucially, he appoints Edward Marsh as his private secretary. Marsh would stick with him for years.
What were his main tasks there?
Early on, it was South Africa again, helping draft a constitution for the Transvaal, setting up government in the Orange River colony, trying to be fair to both Britons and Boers.
It's a tricky balancing act.
Very. And he also had to deal with the issue of Chinese indentured labor there. He announced a gradual phasing out, wary of upsetting the colonies, but also concerned about the practice itself.
And relations with indigenous Africans.
He expressed real concern there. After the Bambatha Rebellion, led by Zulus in Natal, he condemned what he called the disgusting butchery of the natives.
Okay, so 1908, Asquith takes over as prime minister, and Churchill gets a big promotion.
President of the Board of Trade. Big step up into the cabinet proper. And he was only 33. Youngest cabinet member since 1866, I think.
That meant a by-election, right? Which he lost.
He did. Lost his Manchester seat. Cabinet ministers had to stand for re-election back then if they took a new paid office. But he quickly found another, safer Liberal seat in Dundee.
Dundee would become his base for quite a while. And personally, a big year, too.
Yes. Married Clementine Hosier in September 1908. Honeymoon, set up home in London, first child, Diana, born the next summer. That marriage, by all accounts, was a bedrock for him through everything that followed.
So, at the Board of Trade, was he just managing things or pushing an agenda?
Oh, definitely pushing. He got involved in mediating a big dock strike on the Tyne, set up a permanent arbitration court, really worked closely with Lloyd George on social reform.
Inspired by Germany, wasn't it?
Yeah, they looked at Bismarck's welfare state, wanted a national minimum state intervention, led to some landmark stuff, the Coal Mines Act for an 8-hour day, the Trade Boards Act to fight sweatshops, setting minimum wages.
Pretty radical for the time.
Absolutely. Also, the Labor Exchanges Act, basically the first job centers and plans for unemployment insurance. Very progressive.
But all this costs money, which led to clashes over the Navy again.
Exactly. He and Lloyd George fought against Reginald McKenna's plans for lots more battleships. They needed the money for their reforms. They even downplayed the threat from Germany, which is ironic looking back.
And this all fed into Lloyd George's people's budget.
Precisely. That budget, taxing the rich to pay for welfare, was their big play. And when the House of Lords, stuffed with conservatives, rejected it, well, that sparked a massive constitutional crisis.
Churchill was right in the thick of it.
Chairman of the Budget League, warning about class war if the Lords didn't back down, led to another general election, January 1910. Liberals won, just. Churchill kept Dundee.
And he wanted to go even further against the Lords.
He actually proposed abolishing them entirely, or at least radically reforming them into a much weaker second chamber. Eventually, the Lords caved on the budget, but the fight led directly to the Parliament Act of 1911, which permanently reduced their power. Churchill was a key driver in that fight.
Then another big job change. Home Secretary. February 1910. Police, prisons. That's a powerful role.
And he jumped right in with reforms, separating political prisoners from criminals, easing rules for them, prison libraries, less solitary confinement. He even wanted to stop jailing people just for not paying fines and stop jailing youngsters unless it was serious.
Sounds quite liberal, actually.
In many ways, yes. He also reviewed death sentences quite carefully, reprieved nearly half of them during his tenure.
But then there was the issue of women's suffrage. More complicated for him.
It was. He said he supported it, but only if a majority of male voters also agreed. Proposed a referendum, but Asquith wouldn't buy it. So yeah, that didn't win him any friends among the suffragettes.
It led to protests. He was even assaulted.
Yeah, lots of hostility, heckling at meetings, and one suffragette, Hugh Franklin, actually attacked him with a whip.
Wow. And then the Tony Pandy riots. That must have been a major test.
Huge industrial dispute in the Welsh coal mines. The local chief constable asked for troops. Churchill allowed them to be moved nearby to Swindon and Cardiff, but crucially, he held them back from actually deploying against the miners.
Why?
Feared bloodshed, sent unarmed London police instead. Eventually helped broker talks that ended the unrest, but he annoyed everyone, called both miners and owners very unreasonable. The press said he was too soft, Labor MPs said too harsh, damaged his relationship with the labor movement long term.
Another election, December 1910. Liberals scrape back in. Churchill holds Dundee. Then, early 1911, the Sydney Street siege. He was actually there.
He was. This shootout in the East End with Latvian revolutionaries who'd killed policemen. Churchill turned up, didn't direct operations, but famously stopped the fire brigade going in while the men were still shooting from the burning building.
Controversial, sure.
Hugely. The men inside died. Churchill defended it, saying he'd put British lives ahead of ferocious alien ruffians. Very stark.
Okay, then, October 1911, another massive shift. First, Lord of the Admiralty. Finally, he gets the Navy.
The job he seemed destined for, perhaps. And just in time, really, with tensions rising across Europe, he immediately set up a naval war staff.
And focused on getting the fleet ready.
Absolutely. Spent the next 2.5 years constantly visiting bases, dockyards, boosting morale, watching the Germans like a hawk. Germany passed a new naval law in 1912. He vowed Britain would build 2 ships for everyone they built.
Push for modernization, too. Better pay, submarines, aircraft.
All of it. Better conditions for sailors, more subs. And he was fascinated by naval aviation. Pushed hard for aircraft development. Even supposedly coined the term seaplane. Ordered 100 new planes.
But again, the cost opposition from within his own party.
Oh, yes. Some liberals balked at the spending. He actually threatened to resign in late 1913 if he didn't get funding for 4 new battleships. He won that fight. And in mid-1914, he got the government to buy a majority stake in the Anglo-Persian Oil Company.
Why was that so important?
Securing oil supplies for the fleet. Moving away from coal. Hugely significant strategic move.
And all this time, the Irish Home Rule crisis is bubbling away.
It's still a massive issue. The Liberals introduced their Home Rule Bill in 1912. Churchill backed it strongly, urged Ulster Unionists to accept it, argued against partitioning Ireland, made that famous statement later in 22 that Irish unity was what people really wanted, not fighting.
Does he get involved militarily in Ireland?
He increased the naval presence there to deter any unionist uprising. He even floated a compromise idea, Ireland staying in the UK but as a federated part. Didn't really please anyone, though.
Then, August 1914, war. As First Lord, he's right at the center.
Absolutely pivotal. Overseeing the transport of the British Expeditionary Force to France, the naval blockade of Germany. Sent subs to the Baltic to help Russia, sent Marines to Ostend in Belgium, which actually made the Germans divert troops, took control of air defense.
Busy time. 3rd child born then, too.
Sarah, yes, in October 1914. He even went to inspect Antwerp's defenses just before it fell to the Germans. Got criticized for that, but argued he'd helped delay the Germans long enough for the Allies to secure Calais and Dunkirk. Became part of Asquith's War Council and started pushing for tanks, using naval funds.
Always looking for the next thing. But then came the Dardanelles. Gallipoli, the campaign that really tarnished his name for a long time.
That's the one. His idea, really. A naval attack through the Dardanelles Straits to knock Turkey out of the war. Help Russia, maybe capture Constantinople. Bold plan.
But it went disastrously wrong.
Horribly. The naval attacks in March 1915 failed. The landings at Gallipoli in April became a bloody stalemate. Huge casualties, total failure. And Churchill got the blame.
Especially from the Conservatives.
Yes. When Asquith was forced into forming a coalition government with the Conservatives in May 1915, their price for joining was Churchill's head. He had to go from the Admiralty.
Ouch. Where did he end up?
Demoted to Chancellor of the Duchy of Lancaster. Sort of cabinet post without portfolio. Humiliating for him.
So humiliating he didn't stay long. He resigned and went back to the army.
That's right. By November 1915, he quit the government altogether. Asquith, if he could be governor of British East Africa, got turned down. So he decided the only honorable thing was to rejoin the army and serve on the Western Front.
Incredible. Back into the trenches.
Assigned to the Grenadier Guards. Then given temporary command, Lieutenant Colonel of the 6th Battalion, Royal Scots Fusiliers. Took them to the front in Belgium near Ploegsteert, early 1916.
What was that like for him?
Months of shelling, apparently, but no major attacks on their section. Had a near miss with a shell himself. But his battalion was merged with another unit in May 1916. He didn't push for another command. His temporary rank lapsed, and he asked to leave the front.
So back to Parliament. Still under the Gallipoli cloud.
Very much so, especially in the Conservative press. He returned to the backbenches, spoke about the war, wanted conscription for Ireland, better recognition for soldiers, steel helmets, drafted a paper on using mechanical power, tanks basically, but got ignored. Felt frustrated. But eventually the Dardanelles Commission investigated Gallipoli, and its report largely exonerated him.
Then, late 1916, Asquith falls. Lloyd George becomes prime minister. Does that open the door for Churchill's return?
It does. Lloyd George valued his energy, sent him to check out the French war effort in May 1917, then, crucially, appointed him Minister of Munitions in July.
Back in a key role.
A vital one. He sorted out a strike on the Clyde, massively ramped up munitions production, wrote a strategy paper in late 1917 that apparently helped shape the final Allied victory push. He could be tough, though threatened strikers with conscription in 1918.
And he voted for women's suffrage then.
Voted for the 1918 Representation of the People Act, yes, which gave the vote to some women over 30. And his fourth child, Marigold, was born just days after the armistice in November 1918.
So post-war, Lloyd George wins the coupon election. What next for Churchill?
Another huge job. Secretary of State for War and Air, January 1919, overseeing the massive demobilization of the army.
But he wanted to keep troops in Germany?
Yes, persuaded Lloyd George to keep 1 million men in the Army of the Rhine. Interestingly, he argued against punishing Germany too harshly or disarming them completely. Why? Because he saw the new threat, Soviet Russia.
His anti-communism kicks in early.
Very strongly. He was a fierce opponent of Lenin and the Bolsheviks. Initially backed intervention in the Russian Civil War to help the whites, but realized the public wanted troops home. After the Soviets won, he pushed for a cordon sanitaire, a ring of Allied states to contain Bolshevism.
What about other issues? Ireland, the Middle East.
He supported using the black and tans in Ireland against the IRA, which remains deeply controversial. In Iraq, where Britain had a mandate, he sent reinforcements against Kurdish rebels and even suggested using mustard gas, so that wasn't actually done. He thought occupying Iraq was too expensive, wanted to hand parts back to Turkey, but failed.
So a busy and often controversial time at the War Office. Then another switch in 1921.
Colonial Secretary. Still dealing with massive global issues. He had a tough time, personally. His mother died in May 21. And then, heartbreakingly, his little daughter Marigold died of septicemia in August, just 2 years old. Deeply affected him and Clementine.
Professionally, what was key at the Colonial Office?
Ireland, again, he was involved in the negotiations with Sinn Féin that led to the Anglo-Irish Treaty. Okay. Also trying to cut the costs of occupying the Middle East, backing Faisal in Iraq and Abdullah in Jordan.
And Palestine.
He visited the British mandate there, expressed support for Zionism, rejected Arab demands to ban Jewish immigration, though he did agree some restrictions after riots in Jaffa in 1921. A very complex situation even then.
Then the Chenak crisis in 1922 blows up. Turkey threatening British troops.
Big crisis. Turkey looks set to occupy the neutral zone around the Dardanelles, where British troops were stationed at Chenak. Churchill and Lloyd George wanted to stand firm, use military force if needed.
But the conservatives didn't.
Most of them balked, didn't want another war. That disagreement basically broke the coalition government. The conservatives pulled out, forcing a general election in November 1922.
And in the middle of all this, personal life continues.
Youngest child, Mary, born in September 22. He buys Chartwell, his future home, that same month, then gets appendicitis in October, is literally in a hospital when the government collapses.
Talk about timing. And the election.
He lost his Dundee seat to a prohibitionist candidate, Edwin Scrimger. Big shock. Led to his famous quip about being without an office, without a seat, without a party, and without an appendix.
A low point, surely.
Seemed like it. Though Lloyd George did make him a companion of honor in his resignation honors list, still, politically he was out in the cold.
So looking back at everything up to 1922, I mean, what a roller coaster. Privileged start, yes, but not straightforward. School struggles, military action, journalism, switching parties, high cabinet office, war leadership, controversy, defeat.
It's an extraordinary catalog of experiences before he even hit 50. Soldier, writer, politician in multiple major roles. The adaptability, the sheer energy, the willingness to change course or court controversy, it's all there right from the start.
It really makes you think, doesn't it? How did all that, the successes, the failures, the shifts in thinking, the relentless drive, how did all those formative experiences shape the leader he would become during the even more tumultuous decades that followed?
Exactly. That's perhaps the biggest question this early period leaves you with. We haven't even got to the wilderness years or World War II yet. But those foundations were clearly laid by 1922.
So something for you to ponder as we finish this deep dive. What part of that early journey surprised you most? Does it change how you see Churchill, or does it confirm what you already thought? Some real food for thought there.